What's the Vanek deal?
Vancouver Canucks are trading Thomas Vanek to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for Tyler Mott and Jussi Jokinen, who was on waivers. Obviously, that part of it taking a Jokinen contract and back to Vancouver. But Thomas Vanek going to Columbus as a rental at the deadline.
So I think that's the third time, by my count, the third time since 2014 that Vanek's been dealt at the deadline.
During the 2018 trade deadline, Vancouver would ship off veteran forward Thomas Vanek to Columbus for Jussi Jokinen and Tyler Mott. This was the second consecutive year where Vanek would get traded at the deadline, as back in 2017, the Florida Panthers were able to snag him from Detroit. Vanek's trade to Columbus, however, ended up being somewhat significant, as because of the deal, Vanek would become the second player in NHL history to get traded at 4 different trade deadlines, the most in NHL history, and a record that was set almost 20 years prior. Alan May was far from being a regular at the NHL level, as throughout the early part of his career, he'd be tossed around the AHL and the NHL, simply providing depth and a boatload of penalty minutes. But when he did manage to get his shot, he would continue his trend of getting tossed around. May's journey began after he signed with the Bruins as a free agent. While in Boston, he'd mostly played for their affiliate team, only managing to play in 3 games with the team before they decided to ship him off to Edmonton at the 1988 trade deadline. May's time in Edmonton was also uneventful, as he'd only appear in 3 games again, but was able to score his first career NHL goal. The following year, May would continue to play in the minors, and come the 1989 trade deadline, he'd get dealt again, this time going to LA, where he'd only play in the AHL before getting traded again to the Capitals. But the trade was during the summer, so it's not as fun. May, however, seemed to finally find a role with an NHL team, because he'd managed to last 4 years in the nation's capital, being mostly known for his aggressiveness and his time in the penalty box. He also held his own and reaped the rewards, playing 77 games in the 89-90 season and 83 games in the 92-93 season. Unfortunately for May, he'd get dealt away to the Dallas Stars during, you guessed it, the trade deadline, and would continue the trend by getting traded to Calgary the following year, also at the deadline. In a Sportsnet article, May opened up about his constant uncertainty, stating in the interview, quote, "Every game I got to play, I'd stand in front of the mirror and look at myself, thinking this could be the last game I spend in an NHL jersey." Although his career was filled with tons of adversity, May managed to play over 300 games before leaving the league in 1995 for the IHL. May and Vanek may be the most acquired players at the trade deadline, but they aren't the most traded players of all time, as 2 others managed to get traded an absurd 9 times throughout their careers, making history along the way. The one who originally set the record earned the nickname Suitcase due to constantly being shipped around. That player was Brent Ashton, and honestly, his story kinda confuses me. Ashton throughout his career was actually a solid contributor, as there were multiple seasons where he'd put up 50 to 60 points, and even a 75-point year split up between 2 teams. But perhaps his production wasn't the issue. Ashton, although producing impressive numbers, often struggled to find himself a spot on some teams' rosters. Take the North Stars for example. That 82-83 team was deep, and Ashton seemed like he just never fit in, causing him to not only have the worst year of his career, but to of course get traded away. The Suitcase began his career getting selected 26th overall by the Vancouver Canucks. He'd get dealt to the Colorado Rockies, and after the Rockies moved to New Jersey to become the Devils, Brent Ashton would move to become a Minnesota North Star. During the 83-84 season, after a continuous struggle in Minnesota, he'd get traded to Quebec, and then to Detroit, and then to Winnipeg. Ashton enjoyed prime years in Winnipeg and Quebec, and enjoyed some longevity as well, lasting 3 full seasons as a Jet before getting traded to the Bruins. This is probably where I should mention another major factor that played a role in all this. As Brent got older, he struggled with numerous knee injuries that would eventually end his career. He'd mess up his knees approximately 7 times throughout his career, which almost definitely was a reason why he constantly got traded. After rebounding in Boston, Ashton would get traded to his final team in Calgary. He'd be out of the league by 1994 and suffered his career-ending knee injury as a member member of the Thunder in the IHL. Ashton would hold the title of the most traded player up until 2006, when forward Mike Sillinger would get traded to his 9th team. Unfortunately, or fortunately for Ashton, Mike Sillinger is a name almost everyone brings up when mentioning the record, mainly due to him tying it more recently. Sillinger began his career a member of the Detroit Red Wings. Taken 11th overall for his insane scoring prowess, Sillinger unfortunately would never consistently stay on the Red Wings roster. Playing a majority of his time in the AHL, his best year as a Red Wing only saw him notch 29 points in 62 games. After the lockout, the cycle began, as he would get dealt to his first team, the Mighty Ducks. He'd remain a member till the end of the season, but was immediately dealt away to Vancouver the following year. After a year in Vancouver, he'd become a Flyer, and after starting off hot in Philly with 22 points in 27 games, 25 straight games with no goals, saw him get shipped off to the Lightning midway through the season for an important player in Flyers history, Michael Renberg. Come the 99-2000 season, Sillinger, now a member of the Lightning, notched 44 points in 67 games. Good enough statistics to get traded once again, going to the Panthers at the trade deadline, and then immediately getting shipped off to Ottawa at the following year's trade deadline. After signing a deal in free agency with the Blue Jackets, they would thank him for signing by trading him 2 times in one day, sending him to Dallas, who immediately traded him to Arizona for Teppo Numminen. In his first year in Arizona, they'd trade him to St. Louis, who in 2006 traded him to the Nashville Predators, helping Sillinger tie NHL history. What's even crazier, however, is that Sillinger wasn't finished chasing records, as come the 06 offseason, he would sign with the New York Islanders, suiting up for his 12th NHL team, breaking the record for the most teams played for by an NHL player. As of now, Mike Sillinger is currently watching his son, Cole Sillinger, lace up for the Columbus Blue Jackets. Cole has shown flashes of potential, and his electric play reminds me of Sillinger from his WHL days. With the trade deadline looming, Cole should be staying put, but hopefully, unlike his father, he's able to stick around in Columbus for a very long time.
Brought the Jackets to life here, late in the period. Bjorkstrand hustles after it. Gavrikov off the point. Sillinger is first in the National Hockey League.